Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by the head coach of the defending national champion Florida Gators, Todd Golden. Todd, welcome. Has your life felt like a movie for the last 8 months?
I wouldn't necessarily describe it as that. It's definitely been a little different, and obviously the summer was pretty busy. And but once the school year started, we got rocking and rolling with this crew. I wouldn't say much has felt that different.
If your life was a movie, who would play Todd Golden?
You always come at me with these interesting questions, especially early on in the conversation. You know what? I'm not ready to make that call. That's something I'd probably lean on you for.
All right, we'll get to that as time progresses here. You have a long, long career ahead of you. But, Todd, you are now obviously still early in your tenure as a head coach, not just at Florida, but as overall. But you have seen, obviously, the highs and the lows, winning a national title, losing in the first round of the NCAA tournament. From what you've experienced so far, is it harder to build a national championship caliber program or maintain it as you're trying to do this season?
I think they're equally difficult, especially in this era of college sports. You got to get a lot of things have to hit your way. You got to put yourself in position to get lucky. With high school recruits as well as navigating the portal in terms of building up a roster and then maintaining that roster, keeping guys in residence. And as you've seen, after winning the national championship last year, we had some really talented guys that we had to replace, and we're still trying to figure ourselves out that way, but. I think the positives of the new era is if you have a down year, you can get better quickly and right that ship. But it is harder to sustain now than it ever has been.
Now, you are not the first coach in the history of Florida basketball to try to win a national championship 2 years in a row. I'm curious, with all that comes with being the defending national champion, how much have you discussed that journey with Billy Donovan, who won back-to-back titles in 06 and 07?
You know what? We talked a little bit this summer about it, and I think he, obviously was able to provide some really good color on the situation, and the one thing that's continued to resonate with us, that he shared with us is, we have that in our title. We're the defending national champions, but in reality, we're not defending anything. This is a new team.
Yeah.
This is a new group, and we're still trying to figure ourselves out and create our own identity as we navigate this really difficult non-conference schedule. But there has been a lot more pressure, on our shoulders, kind of, coming off last year's team. But at the same time, we got to understand that it doesn't do anything for us anymore. This is a brand
Right.
new opportunity.
Todd, people are going to ask you about that, and obviously people should ask you about that because that's what goes along with winning a championship in college basketball. But when you make that so much a part of the message, does it distract you and your staff from the task at hand on building this team that you're coaching in 25-26?
Yeah, I think if you allow it to be a distraction, it certainly can be. I give a lot of credit to my staff. I think they've done a really good job of leaving last year in the rearview mirror and turning the page to this year's team. And obviously we're built differently and we look a lot different. And it obviously was a fantastic experience. But like I said, we don't get anything for it this year, except a lot more. A lot bigger of a target on our back, as we go into these games and play some of these really, really talented teams that we've come across early in the year.
Todd, it was 11 years and 2 months ago that you were director of basketball operations for Auburn. I still remember it, as clear as day. In your wildest dreams, did you ever think that you'd win a national title before you were 40?
No. I obviously think this happened a little faster, than a lot of people expected. But I was fortunate enough to be around some really talented coaches and people in basketball that helped propel me to a position where I could have this type of opportunity. Obviously, Kyle Smith and Randy Bennett playing for those guys and working for them, and just really understanding what it takes to be good and building, a really strong culture from top to bottom, and then being able to learn from Bruce and seeing a different way to build a program, at the high major level in the SEC, going from really the bottom of the league to what Bruce and Steven were able to do there over the past 10 years was remarkable. And that was my foundation. And that allowed me, when I did get the job at San Francisco to build, or continue building that program from where Kyle had built it. And, obviously this new opportunity at Florida, which is now, into our fourth year, working with those guys gave me the confidence to build this program the way we did.
Todd, you mentioned Kyle Smith, you mentioned Randy Bennett. You had two assistants last year, John Andrushak, who's now at Campbell, and also Kevin Hovde, who's doing a great job at Columbia, move on to be head coaches. And really, this coaching tree is the new coaching tree in college basketball. Why has the coaching tree under Kyle Smith had so much success in college basketball?
We've been fortunate, and I think again it starts with Randy and Kyle. Back in the St. Mary's days, and just building such a solid program there. I think Coach Bennett's in his 25th year or something along those lines, and
Yeah.
continues to win almost every game. Like he has over the past couple of decades. But just that foundation, and I think the St. Mary's way, so to speak, was probably a little undervalued for a long time because of the success that Gonzaga had.
Yeah.
And everything that Mark Few and his tree was able to accomplish. Tommy Lloyd, obviously a fantastic head coach as well. And once people realized how amazing those guys were, and that St. Mary's was going neck and neck, and being able to steal a conference title from them every now and again, people realized that they knew what they were doing in Moraga as well. And as our group has gotten more opportunities, you've seen a track record of success, and it's something that we hope to continue to build upon. But both John and Kevin are great coaches. We miss them. Kevin's doing a fantastic job, as you mentioned, at Columbia.
Yeah.
And, we hope that continues to be something that comes out of our tree as successful young head coaches.
One of the things I remember, Todd, that we talked about over the summer, and I thought it was really, really interesting, was you told me one of the coolest things about winning the national title was you heard from Coach K, and obviously you were a Duke person growing up. What was it like to hear from somebody like him, who you idolized and revered so much, coming up in this business?
That was one of the most surreal moments, to be honest, after last year's, win, along with, meeting President Trump at the White House, but Coach K, a guy I grew up, dying to play for, even though that was never a realistic option in my playing days. You just think of someone, you revere him, you never get the opportunity to really meet him. You see him coach the Olympic team. And then fast forward, I'm fortunate enough to be on his podcast a couple of times. And before the game last week in Cameron, I had the opportunity to meet him, went up and shook his hand before, the starting lineups were announced. And it was just a really cool, surreal moment. Had opportunity to exchange, a couple words with him prior to the game. But to have, really the best coach of all time in college basketball, in my humble opinion, right up there with John Wooden, someone who has a level of respect for a program means a lot to me.
So did somebody tell you he's going to reach out to you, or did he just make a cold call?
In terms of the podcast, you're saying?
No, just in terms of him reaching out to you after you won it.
Yeah, they just reached out through the podcast, just saying,
Yeah.
Hey, coach wants to have you on the podcast and talk through. And I think we were on one time before we actually won as well.
Yeah.
But I definitely jumped at the second opportunity when he asked to have us back on.
Well, you mentioned you obviously were somebody who was a huge fan of Coach K. You followed Duke so closely. What was it like coaching at Cameron Indoor Stadium last week?
It was a great experience. I think I never had the opportunity to play there as a player or coach there as an assistant,
Yeah.
and felt really, awesome that the league selected us to be the
Yeah.
SEC team, to go in there and compete against Duke, who's a top 2 team in America right now, and learned a lot, and thought our team, showed very well. We had a bad end of the first half, but we showed a level of grit and toughness that we needed to show. I thought our second half, it was something that we could really build on. We played really well. We outscored them by 11 in the second half, went toe to toe, blow to blow, had a lead with 30 seconds to go. Just needed one more stop. We weren't able to make it, but we went toe to toe, wire to wire with Arizona on a semi away. Went toe to toe with Duke in an away game. We have another semi away tomorrow night up there in the Garden in your neck of the woods. And at some point, we got to break through and win one of these. But our team is right there. We have a couple things we need to improve on quickly. But we know what we need to get better at, and credit to our guys, because I think you're working really hard trying to do it.
And one of the things that was the difference in the game last week was the fact that Duke had Cam Boozer on its roster. And Todd, I've been doing this a long time. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody run away with the National Player of the Year race a month into the season, but it feels like with what this guy is doing right now, he is just really building a gap every single day. What were your biggest impressions after competing against him, game planning for him, and seeing him in person?
Yeah, we've known Cam for a long time. He came up for the first time with his brother Caden, I think their sophomore year, to check out Florida. We had him on a couple visits, went down to Miami quite a bit. to recruit him and his brother. And so we know what Cam's capable of, and we felt pretty confident that he would have this level of success, at the college level once he arrived. And the guy, all he's done is won. And thought he had a great first half against us, the other night to set the tone. They got a 12-point lead on us. But I thought our front court answered the bell in the second half. We held him to missing 7 field goals in a row. I thought we really stymied, some of their motion, some of the things that bothered us in the first half. But I think the biggest compliment that I can give Cam is he always makes the winning play. And it's not about him scoring the most points, both in our game and in their win against Michigan State on Saturday. It was an assist that he made, a read and react play that led to one of his teammates getting an open shot, and they stepped up and knocked it down. And, I think that's the biggest compliment I can give him is not only is he a great player, but he's a super winning player as well.
Well, let's get to the Gators right now. We've been at this thing about a month. What does Todd Golden think right now of the team that he's coaching in 25-26 and the team that's going to face UConn this week at Madison Square Garden?
I think we're a good team. We're certainly not great yet. I think we have the capacity to become a great team. As I said, we played a really difficult schedule, and that's reflective in our record right now. And the great thing for us is we have some tangible areas that we can really get better. We need to take care of the ball better on the offensive end. We obviously need to shoot the ball better. Yeah. And then defensively, we got to do a little bit better of a job defending without fouling. I think 2 of those things are super within our control, the ball handling and the defending without fouling. The one that we need, that I hope, we can turn the corner on is our perimeter shooting a little bit. And we know we need guys like Xavier Lee to step up and shoot the ball better. And he's not the only one, but that's an area that I think might come and go for us all year. But the ball handling and the fouling, those are 2 areas that, we're only talking, getting 3 or 4 points per 100 possessions better. And if we can do that, we're going to be right there as a top 5, top 6 team. Analytically, we're right there. But I think those are some areas we got to improve. I think our front court's doing a good job. Ruben, Tommy, Kondo, Micah have been able to kind of handle their situations and be able to deliver in most games for us. I think Boogie's coming on. He played a lot better in the second half against Duke and is starting to get comfortable. And we need our bench to be a little bit better. We're not as deep as we were last year, and that's something that what could really help us, as we get into conference play. But again, I'm happy with this team in terms of how we're working. We compete really hard. We've shown some really good grit, and we just need to get over the hump and play a little bit better as we get deep into December here.
What is it like playing with 3 big men on the floor at the same time versus last year where your backcourt was obviously the best in the sport?
Yeah, I think Tommy, it's probably putting him too much in a box to call him a big guy because he's made the transition to the wing very well. He's obviously scoring very efficiently. He still maintains his ability to get on the glass. Defensively, we've been really good, and we are dominant on the glass on both ends because of it. So, it's more of our guards getting comfortable, getting, into this new offense that they haven't, been a part of and picking their spots. But, I'm happy with where our front court's at. I think they've done a good job this year.
You mentioned Tommy Haugh, who moved out to the 3 spot for you this season. He's having a terrific start to the year. If there was one player, past or present, that Tommy Haugh most reminded you of, who would it be?
It's funny, man. We talk about this a decent amount in our office. A name I'm going to give kind of a throwback, and is Dan Marley back in the Phoenix Suns days.
I like it.
An athletic guy that can obviously drill it from deep, but get out in transition and play really fast. A guy that can guard multiple positions. And Tommy's best skill is the level he competes at. He's in great physical shape. He can guard multiple positions. Obviously, he's shooting the ball relatively well, and his ability to get downhill and attack and play fast is really unique. But he's a fantastic athlete, and he's really coachable.
Todd, everybody knows, and you just referenced it, that a big key for this particular team to reach its ceiling is getting better guard play for the short term and the long term. But one guy, and you pointed this out over the summer, that seems to really balance the floor, not just with his shooting, but with his overall feel, is Urban Klavzar. When he is on the floor, how much of a factor has he been just in terms of how seamless sometimes he makes the offense?
He's been great. He's delivered for us. He's been who we expected him to be. He's averaging, I think, a little over 10 points a game. But when he's been in the game, we've been really effective offensively. And that's something that we're very mindful of. He's competed hard defensively as well. But, credit to him, playing that role off the bench right now, coming in, being a little bit of a spark plug for us, being able to hit perimeter shots, also keep us in our offense. And, he's made that transition, and he's a guy that we expected more from this year, and he's delivered for us.
Who specifically are you and your staff looking at off the bench to get a little bit more mileage out of moving forward?
We have a couple guys. I think the one thing that has been a little bit of an issue is we haven't had the type of schedule where we can kind of ease guys into games and
Right.
allow them to play through too many mistakes, and that's probably stalled our growth a little bit. But as we talked about in the summer, CJ Ingram's a guy I got a lot of confidence in.
Sure.
I think he'll continue to eat up more minutes. Alex Lloyd, another freshman that's right there, kind of knocking on the door of playing time. And, obviously we play UConn tomorrow. We play a very good George Washington team this weekend when we come back, to Florida. And then we have a couple games, against some teams that we would expect to beat transparently. And that might be an opportunity for some of our younger guys to get comfortable before we get into SEC play. But the great thing, again, like I said, we have a lot of opportunities in a lot of different places we can look for that little improvement that we need over the next couple of weeks. And, we got to get through some of these tough games, hopefully get some wins, and then have a little bit of time to grow before we get to SEC play.
And the next tough game you will play will be against UConn in a matchup of the last two national champions on Tuesday night at Madison Square Garden. Todd, what was your first memory of the world's most famous arena?
Well, growing up watching the NBA, obviously, Patrick Ewing maybe missing that little float piece to lose the playoff series. I think it was against the Pacers. I can't even remember. I was pretty young back then. But I got to play in Madison Square at St. Mary's. We knocked off Cal in the Coaches versus Cancer to be one of the four teams. We got there, and Cal was still on all the printed material. They definitely did not expect St. Mary's to make it to the venue, but to play there, and I think Dan Schulman had the game with Dickie V back then, and that was pretty unique and amazing to get to play in a game announced by him. But playing against Memphis, Mississippi State in the Garden back in 2004 was a memory that I'll never forget.
Memory that you'll never forget, and your players will never forget, obviously, Tuesday night against UConn. For you as a coach, and obviously this is another thing that comes with winning a national title, you're doing a lot of bucket list things this year. You're playing at Cameron Indoor Stadium. You're playing at Madison Square Garden. I know you're always focused on getting your team ready, but how invigorating is this as a coach?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I wish we could probably enjoy it a little more than we really can because we're worried about those other things. But that happened at Duke. We get there and everybody's in awe of Cameron Indoor and taking pictures, and all I'm thinking about is how we're going to score more points than them and keep them out of out of transition in their own building, things of that nature. But I think it's something that after the year we'll be able to reflect upon and really think about how unique all these different experiences are, that we've been able to take part in. And as you said, tomorrow night's going to be another one. Getting to play UConn in the Garden is going to be a really special occasion.
And this is the second time in this calendar year in 2025 that you're going to take on UConn. You beat them in the second round of the NCAA tournament in March. Your thoughts right now on this rendition of the Huskies?
I think they're really good. I think they're dealing with some injury issues, obviously with Terrace Reed and trying to get him back into the lineup. But you see how they played against UConn going into Fog Allen, getting a win. They're always going to have that grit and that toughness with Coach Hurley. That's kind of in their DNA. And I don't think he puts guys on the floor unless they, embody that. They're still running a lot of really good stuff in the half court, making you chase them, trying to get good threes for Solo and Caravan. This is going to be a really tough matchup for us, and we got to do a really good job controlling what we can control, making sure we get shots on goal, try to attack the glass, and do a really good job in the half court against them, taking away their catch and shoot threes and trying to protect the rim.
What's the hardest part about going against the Dan Hurley coach team?
I think, preparing for their half court offense, they do a really good job of, misdirection and running different guys off screens. And there's a couple different ways you can guard them. And, I think we're gonna have to switch some defenses on them to make sure they're not super comfortable for 40 minutes. But they don't play particularly fast. They want to set up their offense, put their pieces in different spots, and then make you chase them. So we got to be mindful of what they're looking for. And again, we got to do a really good job protecting the rim tomorrow night.
Todd, you got all these big games lined up, and obviously everybody's just trying to get through finals and have a couple of days to enjoy their families and the holidays. But on the back end of that, you are going to be dealing with the SEC. Now, I know that the SEC may not be quite as good as it was last year when it was historically good with 2 teams in the Final Four and 14 teams in the NCAA tournament. But how do you enjoy the holiday season knowing that after that you're going to deal with the SEC?
Yeah, well, like you said, last year I think this league was about as magnificent as you could ever imagine a conference to be. Our league is still great. I don't think it is what it was last year. I think that's fair to say. And the great thing for us this year is after playing Arizona, after playing Duke, after playing UConn up in the Garden, we have played teams that will be at the top of the SEC. We'll have seen pretty much the best in college basketball going into conference play. So I do think this year we will be a little better prepared for SEC play than we were last year when we went into Rupp and really struggled in that first game to kind of get comfortable. So that's the one thing that makes me feel a little bit better of kind of dealing through the pain of this early schedule, is that when we do get to SEC play, we'll have seen everything from a talent and kind of high level team perspective that we will going into league play. It'll just be a little bit different as it'll be interconference.
Todd, you mentioned obviously never in your wildest dreams did you think you'd win the national championship before the age of 40. But now you are obviously going to carry that with you throughout the rest of your coaching career. I remember I was at a Syracuse practice once and I was talking to Jim Boeheim, and he told me that once you go to a Final Four, that's all that matters moving forward. That is the measuring stick for how you're going to feel about a season. Even though that is always going to be your ultimate goal, how do you fight against that on a daily basis to still maintain the intricate steps that it takes to get the team you're coaching better?
Yeah, I think you got to really focus on being process oriented while also being realistic in terms of what your goals are. I hear that loud and clear. I feel that from what Coach Boeheim said. But that, I think that's probably a pretty unrealistic barometer to expect every year,
Yeah.
moving forward. I think our goal is to put a really good team on the floor. We want to have a top 15 level team every year. Put yourself in a position where you're going to give yourself a relatively good shot of making the second weekend if you play well. And then you got to let the chips fall where they may at that point. And you're going to catch some breaks some years, some other years you're not. But all we can focus on is putting together a really good team with a high floor that doesn't beat themselves. A team that defends, rebounds, takes care of the ball well. And, when we have some good luck or when we run into some good matchups, it'll allow us to travel deep into the NCAA tournament. But with that being said, I think this year's team has that. We got to get better in some areas. But we have the nucleus and we have the pieces to make a deep run if we can get better in some areas over the next couple of weeks.
Todd, you were really angry after your first year at Florida when you missed the NCAA tournament. I know you were devastated when you lost to Colorado in the NCAA tournament your second year in a really, really high-scoring game. What's harder, dealing with the adversity that comes with those two disappointments, or dealing right now with the standard that you've set and the expectations that you set after winning a national title?
Definitely harder the first two. The standard, I'll live with that. If we're not meeting the standard every year of being a national championship team, I'll be able to sleep at night as long as we're competing the right way and putting our best product on the floor. But at that point, not making the tournament in year one and not winning our first tournament game in year two, that was much harder to swallow. And that was, much harder to work through. But at this point, again, I think our program's really healthy. I think we're in a really good spot. And we're not satisfied. We have that burning desire to compete every day still and continue to recruit the way we need to, that we're in this position year in and year out.
All right, final thing. Let's wrap on this. Other than getting better guard play out of guys like Xavion Lee and Boogie Fland, what are the biggest keys for this Florida team to, again, have a chance to make a deep run in the 2026 NCAA tournament?
John, it's pretty simple to me, and I think part of the offensive part goes in with that guard play, but they're not the only ones. Our front court's done a bad job in terms of our turnover rate. So on the offensive end, simply taking care of the ball. We need to be a good ball handling team. We can't, be in the 200s in turnover rate. So that's the offensive area. And then defensively, as I noted before, we got to defend without fouling better. We can't, allow these really good teams like Arizona. We did a better job against Duke, but allow them to live at the line. That's not going to be an efficient way to beat them. So if we can get our, really tough, effective field goal defense in that same spot without sending the teams to the line as often, that's going to make us a better defense. So those are the two kind of low-hanging fruits that I see that we're going to go try to attack over these next couple of weeks before we get to SEC play.
Todd, appreciate a couple minutes, man. Looking forward to seeing you guys against UConn Tuesday night at MSG. Have a safe trip to New York, and as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Thanks, Jon.
You got it. That's Florida head coach Todd Golden. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.